Hi and welcome to today's stream. It's going to be a bit weird if you watched last week because I'm doing the exactly the same thing one more time because the sound levels last week was really bad. Basically, the background music was louder than me, so it was total crap. So I decided I'm just gonna redo the whole thing. And what I'm doing is a simple space shooter example in Unity, and I'm using Unity version 5.4. So if you are watching this in the future, you know what to expect. So I'm gonna hit new project here in Unity, and I'm gonna call this Space Shooter version 2. It's going to be a 2D project and create. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import some assets so I have some art to work with. And I'm going to need a player ship, so I'm just I have an Explorer window and I'm dragging and dropping everything into our project folder here. So we're going to need a few things. We're gonna need a little pill that's gonna be our score pickup. We need a player ship, we need an enemy, and we need a laser. So effects, I think, right now. And there we have lasers, and let's add a meteor as well. So, so now we have something to work with. And of course, we need order, so I'm gonna do a sprites folder and put everything in the sprites folder. I'm also going to hit Control S and save the scene straight away. Even though it's empty, it's nice to have it. And I'm gonna create a scene folder, and you see I can do it from here in the save dialog. And I'm gonna call this scene as main scene. Save. Yes, so you see the folder scenes now shows up here, and here is the scene files. So let's start by creating a player that can move around the screen. So I select the player, I just drag him in here, and it creates a player object with the same name as the art. So I'm gonna rename this player and hit enter. And I'm gonna add some components. First, I'm gonna add a polygon collider. And the polygon collider, it kind of like approximates the image shape, but it doesn't do a great job. So we can edit this manually by hitting the edit button over in the inspector. And then we can just adjust this a bit so it's a bit more in the right place. It's better to have it slightly too small than too big, so as long as it's on the inside, it's fine. Yeah, something like that's good enough. The lines here in the middle is something just splitting the polygon into quads. It's basically like showing you what it does behind the scenes. Don't worry about the lines on the inside. If you use the polygon collider, use as few points as possible and don't use the polygon collider for everything. And if it's super detailed, it's better to approximate and do a rough version of it. And then we're gonna add a rigid body 2D that's gonna handle our physics, and we are going to change gravity scale to 0, and we are going to change angular drag to 20. And this is basically so it's going to behave slightly better with our control system. And then I'm gonna hit the button add component, and I'm gonna type player movement, and since there isn't any component called that, it should suggest that we want new script, and that is what we want, and it even puts name in there, so create an add, and that creates an empty script for us. So I'm just gonna load up Visual Studio and place it in the correct place here. Yep. And I'm gonna put this at 200% so it's easier to see on the video. So we're going to do a few things. The first thing is basically what I do in most of my Unity script. I want to be able to control the speed of things. So I'm just going to type public float speed. And making things public here makes them so we can edit them in the editor. We need a reference to our rigid body, to our physics 2D component, so I'm going to create that next. So I'm typing rigid body as the variable type, and I'm naming it rigid body 2D. And in the start function, we are going to type rigid body 2D and say that that is equal to get component of the type rigid body, of course. And this get component function finds the component on the current game object, which is the player, because the script is on the player. And this means that when we want to do stuff with the rigid body, we can just type rigid body 2D, RB2D. And get component is fast, but it's not super fast, so you don't want to do get component a lot of times inside the update function. So let's hit Control S and save. You can see that it turns green here at the side, so you know that you have saved. Let's go to the update function and get some user input. So let's type the following: float x equals input dot get access. And I'm gonna start with get access raw, and then I'm gonna change them to get access, but it's for testing purposes and showing the difference. And then we're gonna type the access name horizontal, and this is something that Unity has set up. Remember to big H on horizontal. And then I just hit copy paste on that line to get another one. And this is going to be vertical, and changing this one to Y. So here is our input in x-axis and the y-axis. And get axis is going to return a value between -1 and +1. So for instance, if we have a joystick and we get the input 0.5, that means that we're holding the joystick halfway between 0, like neutral, and to the edge, which is going to be 1. So this is basically reading the input in a very coding friendly way for us. So let's create a movement vector that we can use to move the ship around. So let's type the following. Vector2 is going to be a 2D vector. Movement equals new vector2 x and y. So this is going to help us with things later, having it in this vector format. And then we're going to type rigid body 2D dot velocity equals movement times speed. So what this does is that we are taking this value and setting that your speed of this object in this instant is going to be this value. So this should be able to make us move. So let's switch over to Unity and check it out. First things first, we need to enter a speed here. Otherwise you're taking your movement, multiplying it by 0, and that is not very fast. So let's hit a speed of 5 and try it out. And we can now use WASD to move around. Awesome. Or the arrow keys. Cool. Let's improve this a bit. One error that we're having right now, if we're going diagonally up to the side, we're actually going faster because if we're going one in x-axis, one in y-axis, we're going basically 1.4 diagonally. And we can solve this by making sure our movement vector has a maximum length of 1, and that's a built-in function called normalized. I'm not going to go into details on everything that I'm doing today because it takes too much time, and I've done this a few times, so it's, yeah, let's leave it at that. So we have a normalized movement times speed, and we're also going to multiply it by time.delta time. And this is how long time the last frame took. Basically, if we have a very slow frame, like we did a lot of stuff, a lot of explosions or something, this value gets bigger. And for that frame that was slow, we are actually moving longer or faster. And then if we have a lot of small frames, we are having a smaller value here, so the average is, it's gonna be the same regardless of frame rate. It's gonna be frame rate independent movement speed here. So that's good. And we are also going to do the rotation straight away here. So first we need to calculate how much the player should move. So we need to calculate what angle we need, how much we have rotated, and that is going to be using the math class and the function aton2, and that takes our y and x axis. Notice that the y axis should be first here, and this will calculate the number of degrees we need to rotate in radians. So we need to multiply this by mathf rad 2 degrees, and since I've done this a few times, I think it was minus 90 to get the correct angle. So let's, okay, we must of course apply the angle before we can test it. So let's go rigid body 2D, move rotation, and put in our angle here. So we are moving the rigid body to this angle. Okay, let's try it out. It actually works correctly, but we're really slow, because now when we're multiplying this value by frame rate, it should be something like 400 maybe instead of 5. So we can go and move all directions, but as soon as we let go, the ship is gonna rotate back to the starting angle, because this calculation is done every time, and if we don't move, this is going to be 0, 0, and then we are going to calculate a 0 angle minus 90 degrees, so we're going to rotate 90 degrees. So we need to check for that first, if we should rotate. So let's create an if statement and check if our movement has a magnitude larger than 0.01. That means that if we have no input or very little input, we're not going to rotate, but as soon as we are moving, we are also rotating the ship. So now I'm gonna switch over to get axis instead, so we have that pseudo acceleration and deceleration, because now we are gonna get like really nice movement here. Yeah, feels alright, and I can stop at almost any angle. I might change this later, but it's good enough for now, at least. Yeah, so that was the first part. We now have a ship and we have movement, so let's move on to making the ship fire. And for that I need a laser. I'm gonna create the laser first. So I go to sprites, I take my laser and I put it into the scene. That creates this blue laser blue 01 object. And I'm gonna make this move, and then I'm gonna make a prefab out of it, and we can use the prefab to create multiple shots. So let's start by making the first one. So let's add a box collider that's gonna have the checkbox X trigger, and let's add a rigid body so that it can move. And I messed up. I added the 3D box collider, and I should have added the box collider 2D, of course. And a rigid body 2D. And this one is gonna be kinematic. And if you have a newer Unity and don't have that checkbox, or an older one, make sure gravity scale is set to 0 if you don't have kinematics, or both, it doesn't matter. And right, the box collider should have been triggered as well. Yeah, sorry about that. So now let's add the laser script. So just type laser in add component, new script, create an add. So this is going to be our laser script. Let's start by removing the update function. We don't need that. But we do need two variables. We need public float speed, and we need public float lifetime. So this is how fast it's going, and this is how long it should stay alive before it's removed. And in the start function, let's start by giving it some speed. Get component, rigid body 2D, dot velocity. So here I'm talking to the component directly by doing this, because I'm only doing it once and in the start function, so it's not going to be running over and over again. And here is the direction it should be going, and it should be going in transform.up. So regardless of how it's rotated, it's always going to move in the local up direction. So if it's rotated 90 degrees, it's going to the side, and so on. And this is going to be multiplied by speed. And the lifetime, we're going to use that to destroy it. So let's type destroy game object after lifetime amounts of seconds. So this is basically telling this laser, this exact laser shot, is telling itself that after this amount of time I should remove myself. So let's save that, and if it doesn't work to save with Control S, and it's I haven't still figured out exactly how it happens, but you hit Alt and Enter, the Alt key and the Enter key. And then it's select properties here in some way, so you have to click the file again, and now you can hit Control S. I don't know why that is, but that's the workaround at least. Yes, so we now have a movement script. We of course need a speed, and this is not multiplied by delta time because we're only doing it once. So end lifetime should be like 3-4 seconds maybe. Let's go with 3. So I hit play and the shot flies away perfectly. So now we need to make a prefab out of this laser. So let's start by creating a folder. And let's create a scripts folder as well. And let's put the files in there. Yeah, stop warning me. Now we take our blue laser and drag and drop it to the prefabs folder. And now we have a laser blue 01 like blueprint that we can use to create more of them. So this shot here, let's just hit delete and remove it, because if we want more we can just use this one. So let's go back to the player. Let's add a script and let's call that player fire. That will make the player fire. Reload, and it's probably gonna yeah, okay. Yes, and the player fire is gonna have a few things. It's gonna have firstly public game object laser. Oh, sorry, small l. And it's gonna have a public float fire rate, how quickly you're allowed to fire. And it's gonna have a private variable called next fire. So float next fire. Next fire is gonna start at 0. And this is basically going to handle if enough time has passed since last time you fired. We might need the start function later, so I'm going to leave that empty for now. And in the update function, we're going to type the following. So if input.get button down, let's just go with get button instead. And the button we are going to use is fire1, capital F. So this is right now inside the if statement is running every frame. So it's going to run all the time. Because yeah, on fire1 it's left control or left mouse button. If you want to use space, that would be jump by default. You can of course change these in the editor, but I'm gonna use fire1. And we're gonna do another check before we fire. So if we are pushing down the fire button and next fire is larger than fire rate, then enough time has passed since last time we shot laser. And the first thing we do after we have successfully managed to enter the if statement is that we are going to type next fire equals 0 and reset it, because it started at 0, and every frame, every time the update loop is running, we are doing the following thing. The next fires is increasing with time.delta time. And this is actually counting in seconds. So if we put fire rate here at 1 second, then every frame we are running, we are adding some time to next fire. And when next fire becomes larger than 1, because we have 1 second here and it takes 1 second for it to do that, we set next fire to 0 and start adding more time to it. So it's gonna be like a few milliseconds off the exact fire rate. It depends on how we select to structure it, but it's gonna be good enough. And now we just need to create our laser. So let's instantiate. That's the command to create another game object. And we are going to create a laser at transform.position. And since this script is on the player, this is the player's location. And we are also going to use the player's rotation. That means that the new laser is going to have the same position as the player, and is also going to have the same rotation as the player. Let's save this and try it out. So let's first make sure we have set some good values here. So it's asking for a laser, and we have that in the prefabs folder. So just drag and drop it. You can also hit this little button and select it from the list. And the fire rate should maybe be 1.2 seconds or 1.15 maybe. Yeah. So far so good. Let's move the play fire to the scripts folder. Ignore the line endings and start working on the pickups. Our pickup is going to be this blue little pill that is going to add some score to the player. So we take the blue pill, drag it out here. It's going to be quite small, but that's fine. For us to be able to interact with it, then it needs a collider. So let's add a circle collider this time. Make it just a tiny bit smaller. 0.1 seems fine. And we are going to add a pickup script. This is something you can do in a lot of different ways. I prefer to have like, okay, this is the pickup. It should know about itself and tell everybody else when they are interacting with it. Other people like to put like a script on the player. That's the pickup script, and it checks like, okay, I collided with something that has this name, and then it does stuff with the player. But this is sort of the same thing, but everything is on the corresponding object. I just find that the easier way to do it. So yeah, we have a pickup script, and it's called blue pill. I think that's an okay name. So let's drag that to the prefab folder, and we have now created a blue pill prefab. And let's open up the script. Yeah, okay. It's something with this properties windows. If you click like that, the save starts working. All right, so let's see what we need here. We need, oh yes, okay, oh yeah. We need the following, and this is just gonna add some score to the player, just to show the basics. So let's go with public int score, and that is how much, let's call it points instead. You get some points for this that adds to your score. And yes, we don't need start or update, I think, so just remove them, and let's create the following. Void on trigger enter 2D collider 2D other. So this is Unity function that we can use because we are using Unity, and it's located inside the Unity engine. And this function will run whenever something enters this trigger. And the object that entered the trigger is the other object. So we can now do the following. If other.gameObject, so if the other game object that entered our trigger has the tag player, that means that that means that the object that collided with us is the player, and we can then add some score. But for now, let's just type the following: debug.log points. Let's do it properly. The player got points, amount of points, and I'm missing a plus sign there. And once the player have gotten his point, let's just destroy the game object. And here the order are important, because this won't happen if we, for instance, put this before the player collided with it. So let's go to the editor and set up everything so this works. So first thing first, I missed a few little details. The circle collider here of this one should of course be his trigger, and the point should be, let's say, 100 points. And since I've already created my prefab, I need to hit the apply button here to update the blueprint. You can see that it is in bold, and that means it's for this one and not for the prefab. So apply, and that's good. So if we look at the prefab, it's now the same thing as this. The only thing that's different is the position and rotation, and that it should always be different. Yep. So let's try it out. And yeah, we have one more thing. The player is not yet tagged. So let's select the player and go up here to where it says untagged and select the player tag. All right, now it should work. So we can hit the blue pill and we get a debug message. If you don't have the console up, you can still see it down here. and it says that the player got 100 amount of points. Very, very weird, sort of strange English, but okay. So, all right. We now have a functioning blue pill. The next part is that we want a spawner that can spawn some random blue pills for us to pick up. And when we have that, we can add a score counter so that we can pick up some score. So let's create the spawner first. We are going to create it in the following way. Let's hit create empty and type the name pickup spawner. Press enter. And on this little cube up here, we can select label instead. So then we can see the name here in the editor and we can easily get a hold of it. Because if you have the icon, then it's invisible and you can't click it. So it's a really neat little thing too. And you can also put the same color on all the different spawners if you like, and so on. So you can organize things using the labels. So let's place it somewhat here in the middle, and we are going to use this to spawn stuff all over the place. So let's create a spawner script. Create an add. Yes, and we don't need the update function in this one either. We're going to use the start function. So first thing first, we need to know what we should be spawning. Sorry. So let's go public game object. Here I don't really want to call it pickup because we might want to use the same script to spawn something else. But for continuity's sake, I'm just going to call it pickup here. Pickup. Yes. And how many pickups do we want to spawn? So we are going to say spawn 10 of them. So let's start by creating a loop. So let's type for, hit tab twice, and go from 0 to amount. So this would spawn a big pile of pickups right at the center of the screen, I think. I don't know where it spawns if you don't have the transform, but we're gonna change that soon. So we need to create a distance from the spawn points where they are allowed to spawn. And I'm actually gonna do that in a slightly weird way, I think. No, I'm not. I'm gonna use the simple way as possible. So yes, I think I want to do it like this. I'm gonna go float x equals random range, and it's gonna spawn somewhere between -8 and +8. Float y is gonna be random range -5 to +5. And these values I'm gonna show you in the editor. So if I borrow the player right now, if I hold him here, we can see that we have 8.8. So 8 is gonna be here. So -8 to +8 is somewhere on this line. All the power-ups should spawn. And if we go up here, we see that the y value here is 5. and -5. So basically the numbers here represent this area. This can be done in much fancier and more interesting ways, but right now I'm doing the as easy as possible and as clear as possible what I'm doing. Then I'm creating a vector2 that I'm going to call offset. And that is equal a new vector2 with x and y. The same thing like I did with the movement script before. And when I spawn it at transform position plus offset. And then it says it's a vector2 and a vector3. So let's do let's change this to vector3. I thought it might be possible and that it would simply like assume that the Z component would be 0. And transform dot rotation. So, all right. So this should give us a fair amount of pickups. So let's select the pickup spawner and say that we want 10 pickups of the type blue pill. And we hit play and we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 pills that we can pick up. Looked very much like it. Yeah, it's 11. Yeah, because we already have one in the scene, just as I thought. So let's remove that. The last time it was either outside the frame or it spawned twice in the same position. This is also it's the correct amount. Let's try it again. So we have 5 and 4, so it's gonna be double somewhere. There we had 5. It went 3 to 5. Okay, so right now, since these are integers, it's gonna not have any decimal points when it randomizes. So just add some f to indicate that it's float, and we should see difference in the spawning patterns. Now we can see that it's not as structured, it's not as grid out. Yeah. So yeah, this is gonna be our spawn script for now. We are going, like many other things, redo it later in a more efficient and cooler way. Yes, so the last thing I'm gonna do in this segment is that I'm gonna add a canvas. I'm gonna add a score counter that counts up every time you pick up, and you can see how many points you have without having to look in the editor. So it's a good time to hit Ctrl S to save your scene, and then we go up here to the hierarchy and select Create, UI, Text. And this creates something really huge, and it's basically because the canvas system has a completely different scale from the rest of Unity. We are gonna do a few minor things. First we're going to select the canvas, then we are going to go to the inspector and we are going to select scale with screen size, and that is going to help us later. Let's just leave it at that. When working in the canvas, make sure you are using the rect transform tool up here when you're moving stuff, so you have the snapping and you have the corners and everything like that. So this is going to be our score counter. So let's just type score and then a few zeros, so you can see how big it's going to be and how much it's going to have, like how much space it's going to take. And I want this in the top left corner. And right now you can see that you have this marker here, and it calculates the distance from there to position it. We can change that using this anchor presets, and if we want something in the top left corner, just use top left corner, and so on. It's basically rough positioning of the object, and you can fine-tune it later, but that's quite important. And this is of course the text that is shown, and we are going to change the color to white, so we have white text, so it's gonna look like this in the game. And we are going to change the font actually. Whoa, wrong button, sorry. So we just go to the Windows disk, and we go to the Windows folder, and we go to the fonts folder, and here we have all the fonts on the computer. You can of course download, and most fonts will work fine. And just find something that looks nice. I'm gonna use the Magneto Bold, I think. So pull that into your projects window. Let's create a folder called fonts. When selecting and using fonts, don't mix and match too much. Limit yourself to 2 or 3 fonts at most, and pick fonts that looks nice. So that doesn't look nice. Let's see if we can do. That looks even worse. Well, okay, I'm gonna stick with it anyway. I can't be bothered. So we have a score, we have a font, and we should now make the score system. Yeah. now I've just thought of a completely different way of doing this, but I should stick to the one I've been teaching at school. So let's create a empty game object, and I'm going to call this game controller. And here I'm gonna put all the scripts that I don't know where else to put. I'm gonna have the main camera, game controller, player, so I have it in a nice decent order. I usually keep canvas and event system at the bottom. So on the game controller, I'm gonna hit add component and type score controller. And the score controller is gonna be quite simple. And it does not need an update. If you put like the score update code in update, it would work, but it's no point updating that every frame if you don't get score every frame. So we need a few things here. We need int score, and it starts at 0. We don't have any points when we're starting out, and we need to find the text object so we can update it, and it's going to look like this. Public text, and here I'm gonna hit escape and type score text. So this does not it doesn't find this right now, but you have this little light bulb, and using Unity Engine UI it will add this line up here. So using Unity Engine UI has all the UI elements including text. So now this turns green and everything is all nice. So in the start function we should set the score so to 0. So let's type score text dot text equals score. And since I used capital letters in before, I'm using it now as well. So score. So this will update the score text when we start, and then we will need a function that we can call when we get points, and it's going to look like this: public void add points, int points, and score increases with number of points that we got, and then we're basically doing this again. So just copy paste that, because now score has changed and we update score. We don't put this in the update method because then we would do this every time regardless, and that's just stupid. Yes, that's the score controller. And in the editor, we have the score controller now has a room for our text object. So let's pull that and put that in here. You should, if you're really good, name all the canvas object with what they are, the same as with any other game object, because now it's much clearer here. And the reason I'm typing score text.text is basically like this is the score text object, and this here is the actual text. So it's text.text and text.character and text.paragraph, and that is why it's text.text. So now the pickup should be, we should make the pickup tell the score system when we get points. So let's go back to the pickup script here where we told the player that he got points and then we removed the pickup. We should now locate the score controller and tell the score controller how many points it should add. So let's type the following: game object, find game object of type score controller, add points, points. So this command will locate, it will look in the hierarchy for the first instance of score controller that it will find. So if you have multiple, you might get some errors or some problems, but if you make sure you only have one score controller, and then you can find it by this way, and then you can just go add points, because this is public. We made this public, so then we can go add points. And that should be it. Let's try it out. So yeah, we can now collect our points and we can see that it updates up here. That is really good. Awesome. That is all for part 1. Part 2 is, I was planning on doing 2 parts today, but I need to do some more planning first, I think. So part 2 is probably gonna be next week, but this is at least something to get you started and make sure that everything is up and running for that. Thank you very much for watching. If you like it, please hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss any of my videos. And feel free to leave a nice comment if you like. If you want to leave a rubbish comment, then don't bother. I'm just gonna delete it. So yeah, thank you and see you next time.